Hey guys, John Jr. here, bringing you guys another BBR team builder. This time for week 5, we are playing my good friend JBear, who is actually one of my online friends that I met in real life in a Chicago meetup not too long ago, I think 2 years ago at this point. So he is like a little brother to me, and obviously you don't lose to your younger siblings. So I don't plan on losing to JBear today, but I do think that the matchup is pretty 50-50. The matchup consists of the following. JBear has Garchomp, Cinderace, Baxcalibur, which is Terra Dragon and Terra Electric, Gengar, Klefki, Rotom-Mow, Dunsparce, Heracross, Quagsire, and Drifblim. So what are the things that initially stand out to me about this matchup? First and foremost, the best Pokemon on JBear's side, without a doubt, is going to be Gengar, which is super ironic because we are obviously the Portland Nightshaders with Gengar as our mascot. He can be Specs, and not only can he be Specs in this matchup, he can be Modest, and he can pump out a lot of damage. Our resists are going to be Wo-Chien as well as Cyclizar for ghost types, and obviously neither of those want or can really take a Sludge Wave, especially if he's Modest. As for his moveset, I think he would be dual stabs with Psychic. I'm not sure of the last move. He could be Toxic Spikes just in case we don't bring Glimmora. He could be something like Energy Ball to hit maybe Slowbro and Dondozo, but I'm not 100% positive. On what that last slot could be, I think dual stab plus Psychic just hits pretty much everything. His next best Pokemon is going to be Baxcalibur with both the Terra Dragon and Terra Electric. I actually do not think there's a wrong Terra in this matchup. I think he could very easily bring either of the Terras and put us in a lot of danger. We do have two really great initial checks in both Dondozo as well as Slowbro, but he is obviously Terra Electric, so that's not really going to work. But he doesn't have to go Terra Electric. He could easily go Banded Glaive Rush with Terra Dragon and send us sideways. We are going to get blown back. The rest of JBear's Pokemon, he has some Pokemon that do well, but no Pokemon that do superb outside of those two Pokemon. I think Klefki is a must bring. I obviously have a Chien Pao, and we're going to try to prep around it. We'll see how that goes. But I do think Klefki has to come for that in some fashion, but it's also weird. I could totally see him not bringing Klefki if he thinks that he just wants to play HO and kind of force our Chien Pao to take hits that it doesn't want to take. Because Klefki, outside of Chien Pao, does really poorly. We have Gholdengo, which is just a guaranteed switch into that Pokemon, as well as he doesn't really touch Glimmora either. So that Pokemon, while I think it's a necessity, if he doesn't bring it, I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world. As for his other slots, it's really up in the air. The only two Pokemon I don't really see coming, I don't ever see Drifblim coming. I don't think in any universe Drifblim ever comes. And then like Heracross does fine, but I think he just has Pokemon that do better than it. So I do not expect to see a Heracross. I think if we do see a Heracross, it has to be Scarf. But the downside with Heracross, especially a Scarf Heracross in this matchup, is obviously we have Chien Pao and it doesn't really appreciate Terra Ice Shards, and we also have a Kilowattrel that hard walls it, and a Slowbro that makes it really hard to lock into a move. The other Pokemon that I do think could come, I think Quagsire makes a lot of sense, especially for Quaquaval. As to whether he's water absorbed to catch my Aqua Step so we can't get a free Aqua Step off, or if he's unaware so I can't be a bulk upset, that's to be determined. I think there's a lot of viability for both of them, and I think either one really makes sense. So if he does bring that, we'll need to get a little bit of information before we just go firing Aqua Steps off. I think Garchomp is a Pokemon that comes to almost every single matchup. He could just be Bulky Rocks in this set. Bulky Rocks with Yashi, and then he could be in a pretty good spot. The only issue with Terra Fairy Chien Pao. So it does make it a little bit weird, and if he doesn't bring Garchomp, if he opts to bring something else, that would make sense. But also our ground resist are simply Wo-Chien and Kilowattrel. So I do think Garchomp comes in some capacity. And in the last slot, the Dunsparce, it could come. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. It could come but it doesn't make sense to me because it loses to Gholdengo, which would be the thing that it wants to check. So I don't think it comes. I think the last slot is really up to either Cinderace or Rotom-Mow. Rotom-Mow has a fine matchup, but we have Kilowattrel to hardball it always, as well as Cyclizar, which doesn't really care about it. But Cinderace in the same breath has a really poor matchup, and to me, I have Dondozo and Slowbro. But the thing with Cinderace is it can grab momentum and it can also court change. So I do think Cinderace over Rotom-Mow. I think his 6 are going to be Garchomp, Cinderace, Baxcalibur, Gengar, Klefki, and probably Quagsire, although I think we could see some variation of maybe Rotom-Mow in there, and maybe Heracross, man, I don't know. Alright, I've rambled long enough. The team we're bringing, our first Pokemon, is going to be Sneaky, the Chien Pao. We are opting for Terra Dark this matchup, and I want to go ahead and say this. I think if you are screaming at your screen right now saying Terra Fairy does better, I don't think you're wrong. I think Terra Fairy also does well. I don't think either one does super better than the other one. The reason I am Terra Dark and not Terra Fairy is because I think is because of specifically Klefki. Klefki is obviously a very scary Pokemon, especially in the Chien Pao, and if I go Terra Fairy, he'll be able to get those Prankster Thunder Waves off. I do think there is a possibility that he could be Magician, not Prankster, due to the fact that I could just Terra Dark, but just in case, I think Terra Dark in general just does really well. He doesn't have great Dark Resist on his team outside of Klefki. And with the Lumberry, if he is Magician Klefki, we can set up a Swords Dance in his face. Terra Dark, he can't out-prioritize. He can't out-prioritize us the next turn and get a second Thunder Wave off. If we're at +2, if that Klefki is any amount of chipped, which based on my game plan is going to have to be, then we're able to do 50% with a Brick Break, breaking through screens, and we should be able to take the Klefki down. So I think this is our best set. We're also Lum. It helps with a potential Rotom-Mow, whether it be Will-O-Wisp, like Yachi Will-O-Wisp, or what the case may be, in a potential Dunsparce Glare if he wants to go that route. As for our moves, we're Swords Dance, Crunch, Brick Break, and Ice Shard. Ice Shard's very important here. It helps with Gengar, Baxcalibur, and Garchomp. I do think his Gengar, if brought, could be Spec, so Sucker Punch makes a lot of sense, but getting the damage off with Ice Shard is a little bit more valuable, just because if something like Klefki switches in, any chip is good chip. Brick Break is there specifically for Klefki to break screens, and then Crunch hits literally every Pokemon on his team except for Klefki and except for Heracross. We could also have been Psychic Fangs. Psychic Fangs was something that I was thinking about specifically to hit into a potential Heracross that wants to switch in, but I really am just so confident that he's not bringing that Heracross, and not bringing it as a switch into this Chien Pao specifically, that I opted for this moveset. Going back to the item, we're actually Lum, not Heavy Duty Boots, because we have a pretty reliable remover this week we're going to talk about in a little bit, but I don't really expect to play with hazards on the field, and if I do, so be it. He has a very reliable rocker and very reliable spikes. Maybe it'll bite me at the end of the day, but I do think I value Lum more than Boots in this matchup. As for our EVs, we are 16 HP, 192 attack, 172 speed def, and 128 speed Jolly. With these EVs, we are able to outspeed a potential Cinderace, and then we can live a max Boom Burst from the Dunsparce if he's max special attack, and then we simply went the rest into attack. This is more so a breaker than a win con, but if the opportunity arises, we will use this as our potential win con. But it's more so here just to Terra Dark, fire off Crunches, and do big damage. But if the Klefki goes down early, we could definitely use this as a win con. We just have to kind of be wary of what Pokemon are alive, what percentage they're at, how healthy the Heracross is if it's brought, things like that. For our next Pokemon, this is going to be the primary win con, but it can also be a secondary win con, a secondary, maybe a breaker even, if we want to use Chien Pao as the win con. We are going to be a sub-SALAC Gholdengo with Make It Rain, Shadow Ball, and Nasty Plot. I ultimately decided on this set because Gholdengo offensively destroys JBear's team. The only problem with it is the fact that it's super slow. I don't necessarily know if I see any Scarfers on JBear's side in this matchup. I don't necessarily think I do, because I think JBear is going to try to play behind a screen most of the game. He could be maybe Scarf Garchomp. He could be, Dragon Dance on Baxcalibur. I don't know. He could be Scarf Heracross if he brings it. I think Scarfers are kind of unlikely here. Like I said, maybe the Garchomp. So I think getting that sub-SALAC is going to be pretty important and actually pretty easy into the Pokemon that JBear has. Make It Rain plus Shadow Ball, unresisted on JBear's teams. Only Shadow Ball resist in general is the Dunsparce, and Make It Rain blows it sideways. And this is our guaranteed switch into Klefki. Klefki cannot, no matter how much it wants to, touch us. It can just simply get screens up, so we're able to sub on that Pokemon, and even Nasty Plot depending on what Pokemon comes in, because the thing with Klefki is usually he's probably going to value the Reflect more. Our physical attackers are just scarier. That's just how it is in this matchup. I don't think he stays in on Gholdengo with Klefki. I think he guarantees switches out. So, but if he does, we get the sub up, and then we get the Nasty Plot up, and then we're in a really good spot, and we can even potentially get the SALAC Berry up. Now this is a late game win con. This is how we want to win the game. We obviously need a lot of information. We need to find out what Scarf, we need to find out what kind of set his certain Pokemon are, and we need to get Chip on a couple of different Pokemon in order to fulfill the in-game with Gholdengo, but I do think it is very achievable. Our next Pokemon is going to be super needed into Garchomp, Cinderace, and Baxcalibur, and that's going to be Slowbro. We are going to be Wakambari to potentially take a hit from that Baxcalibur, and we're going to be Slack Off, Foul Play, Future Sight, and Yawn. Foul Play, obviously, Baxcalibur, Cinderace, Garchomp, it hits those Pokemon really well. Future Sight keeps some guessing games and also forces some potential chip on things that don't want to take it. He doesn't have a great switch into Future Sight. I actually don't think he's a Dark type. I didn't notice that until now. But he does not have great switches. He switches in Klefki, but Klefki doesn't want to get chipped. And any chip on Klefki brings us closer to either in-game that we have in Chien Pao and Gholdengo. And then Yawn, we can Yawn on a potential setting up Baxcalibur if I don't kill him with Foul Play, or if I'm unable to put him in range advantage of Ice Shard from Chien Pao for whatever reason. As far as our EVs, we are simply a max Fizz Def Slowbro. We have no reason to be anything else. We don't care if we really outspeed the Quagsire, and we aren't going to take hits from Gengar, so I think this was pretty easy as far as the EVs go. Sometimes it is this easy, you don't even have to think, you can just go max Fizz Def Slowbro. Our next Pokemon is going to be the only shimmer of hope on our team to switch into Gengar, and it doesn't even do it if he clicks Psychic or calls us one single time. It's going to be Glimmora. We're going to be Assault Vest this week, and we are going to be Corrosion with Corrosion because we are Mortal Spin, and if he switches in Gengar on this for whatever reason, or if he stays in with his Gengar on this, we can get a Mortal Spin off and get a Toxic off or a Poison off on that Gengar. We are also Power Gym, Earth Power, and Energy Ball. These three moves just hit the majority of his team. Energy Ball allows us to hit the Quagsire, Earth Power allows us to hit the Klefki, and then Power Gym hits the rest of the Pokemon. The only Pokemon we don't hit for, significant damage is going to be the Garchomp, but we don't really want to stay in on that Pokemon anyway. As for our EVs, we are 200 HP, 40 defense, 28 special attack modest, 228 special defense, and 12 speed. We can live 2 Shadow Balls from Specs modest Gengar after Rocks. We can live 2 banded Pyro Balls from a potential Cinderace after Rocks, and then we have some speed for some potential speed creeps. Like I said, this Pokemon's only real function is to switch into that Gengar, and if he calls us once on the Psychic, it's looking rough, man. But it is what it is. This is the only really good switch into Gengar, and it also forces Chip on the Klefki if he does want to switch that Pokemon in on us. And that is also his only way to block our spin. If he wants to block our spin and send in the Klefki, I'm fine with that because then I'll be able to get an Earth Power for 50% off. Next up, our 5th Pokemon is a fan favorite. We're going to bring Quaquaval. I feel like I had to bring this into JBear. Offensively, it just does super well, and I thought about bringing a bulk up taunt set for the Quagsire, whatever his name is, but my buddy Star convinced me that Water Absorb is a possibility, and I don't know. I think Unaware is more likely, but Water Absorb definitely has its usability here. So instead, we're going to be an offensive pivot with Band, with U-Turn Aqua Step, Aqua Jet, and Close Combat. He just simply does not switch into dual stabs. Priority Aqua Jet is really nice into this matchup, and honestly, looking back, I wish I went Torrent over Moxie. I don't really think it's going to matter, but I think it could come into play potentially. And this is probably going to be our guaranteed lead depending on the 6 Pokemon that we see from JBear's side. We have 8 HP, 232 attack with an Adamant nature, 80 defense, 24 special defense, and 164 speed. We can outspeed Cinderace at +1. We can live a Life Orb, Garchomp, Earthquake into Rough Skin. You might be thinking, wow, that's such a niche scenario. That sounds so stupid. He could lead Garchomp. I think it's a very big possibility, especially if we lead Quaquaval. And I don't think he's banded in this matchup. I don't think it makes a lot of sense in the Wo-Chi and Kilowattrel. I do think if anything, he's Life Orb, and we could live that. We could do some massive damage with Close Combat, potentially send him packing, as we do a lot of damage with Banded Close Combat, and then we live the Earthquake into Rough Skin, and we still have this Pokemon in the back. And then we can take a Specs modest Shadow Ball from the Gengar if it does ever come to that, and then we went the rest into Attack Adamant. Like I said, offensive pivot, we get this in and we just do some big damage, and we might even lead this Pokemon. And then lastly, this Pokemon I'm not super proud of. I felt kind of rushed into this Pokemon, not by the fault of JBear by any means, but from the fault of my brain couldn't comprehend a better 6th Pokemon. So we're going Kilowattrel for Rotom specifically. If he doesn't bring Rotom, then this Pokemon looks kind of silly, but we are heavy duty boost with Roost, U-Turn, Hurricane, and Thunderbolt. We're just enough speed to outspeed Cinderace, max special attack, rest, and HP. This is not my best set by any means. I do think Kilowattrel does really good offensively into ground type Garchomp and ground type Quagsire. I almost valued Wo-Chi more in this slot just to alleviate a little bit of pressure on both the Garchomp and the Quagsire, but I felt like then we got destroyed by Rotom, and especially if we lead Quack, I really like having this Volt Absorb pivot into Rotom to be able to take both of its stabs and be able to fire off a free U-turn and get momentum on whatever he wants to go into. That was essentially the idea with Kilowattrel. Hurricane is also pretty unresisted on his team, and it also gives us some sort of switch into a Heracross. So that's going to be the team, guys. Like I said, the win con is primarily Gholdengo. It can be Chien Pao if it needs to come to it. We have League Quaquaval to do as much damage as possible, and then we're going to have Slowbro to deal with all of the physical offensive threats, hopefully, and then we have the Glimmora specifically to deal with the Gengar. I hope that team makes sense. I don't really have a better explanation for the team than that. Do I think it's my best team I've built all season? No, but I do think that it can definitely get the job done. I'm excited to use SALAC Gholdengo, and I hope you guys are excited to see it in action. Thank you guys so much for not only watching this team builder, but all your support on the recent BBR videos. It means the world to me, and thank you guys so much for watching. And for now, guys, this has been John Jr. signing off.